Welcome to a very special show and welcome to very turbulent times. They say we live in the golden era of technology and the mobile domain truly dominates. More smartphones were sold this year than any other device. More apps were downloaded than the world population. And more people access the internet on a mobile phone than on any other device. And yet I say we live in turbulent times. We do. From HP to Apple, Google, Android, Motorola, everybody's making news. So we took this opportunity, a rare opportunity, met up with 7 CEOs from the mobile domain companies from across the world and in India. Let's find out who we are featuring.
Every part of the world, when 3G gets adopted, 2.5G volumes begin to rise.
We're going to see a lot of really aggressive form factors of notebooks, tablets, convertibles that go between being a tablet and you snap it into a keyboard and it's a notebook, and all those things with full windows on it.
MapMyIndia has been innovative and has been ahead of the pack in terms of showing the industry done. But of course, when we started Mapping India 95, or my parents started this business, people said they were crazy thinking that we'd be mapping India.
The consumer connect to me was missing for a little while. I wouldn't say it was absent, but it was a little bit on a low key compared to what it ought to have been. HTC does thrive upon the partnership with some of the key partners, whether it's Google and Microsoft.
On Android. So I think for consumers, where we want to take this debate is not so much about are you buying an Android phone or a non-Android phone, but are you buying a social networking product versus a music product versus a gaming product.
Given the investments that we have, given the scale we have and the success we had, right, how would they plan to compete with us? And it's a tough story on the other side.
So those are the players. Now let's get the real movie started. Our first story is on Google. They bought Motorola. What happens now? All the other Android partnerships, LG, Sony Ericsson, Spice, all the others that are there with them, are they getting edgy now?
In a startling move, Google, a search engine and operating system player, bought Motorola for an astonishing sum. Why would Google do that? Wouldn't it alienate its other partners on the Android, namely Samsung, Sony Ericsson, HTC, Spice and LG? Importantly, Google seems to pacify its partners by saying this deal was done for patents and thus all partners would benefit.
Google, your Android OS supplier, takes over Motorola, right? A lot of people say this can make you a little antsy, a little edgy, because at the end of the day, anybody, if I was your OS supplier and I bought a hardware manufacturer and a brand, I will first focus on that. You will be second for me, even if I promise you every single time I meet you that no, come on, you're my preferred partner. I'll never let you, down in any way. But that's human and company psychology. Are you edgy?
No, we are not actually. In our view, we think it's a very welcome step. But look at it as follows. From a global perspective, this whole thing is about patent wars, be it the acquisition a little while back of Nortel assets on the patents front.
And where our two partners amazing story behind.
And our two partners, Sony and Ericsson, were involved in one form or fashion with Microsoft and others. And obviously, from our point of view, that have bet so strongly on the Android platform, this one is very good because what it does is that in the patent portfolio that it brings along with Android, it allows us to have, to actually breathe easy.
Do you think Google can make Motorola a bigger company, or will they just take it easy there? And
I would not want to speculate on what Google would do.
I think the world's getting more extended. There was a Googleized part of the world, and Apple and Yahoo and Google and all those guys, and then it's the telephone operators, and then the equipment manufacturers, then the handset manufacturers. And when you looked at your competition and your play, you would generally get boxed in one of these divisions. Now when we look at the competition, we look at all these guys, and therefore I refer to them as frenemies. They're neither friends nor enemies. I think this ecosystem will slowly learn to work with each other. will only the Googleized part survive? Will only the operator part survive? I think there is no perfect answer to this. I think everybody will survive.
Well, I think it's not just us, but I think the whole tech industry was caught by surprise with this move. Of course, Google has, they've spoken to us about it, and they have indicated to us that this is a defensive as much as a move that they had to do. But I think for us, Rajiv, we needed an open operating system like Android. What we've understood is this move was necessary to protect Android. So for us who have aspirations to build in the smartphone category, it was necessary that Android has a very robust roadmap going forward.
And while it seems that most of the partners are sitting okay, it does seem obvious that Google will now give preferred features and updates to Motorola, its own company. After all, it spent huge sums of money and is answerable to its shareholders to make Motorola a successful and profitable acquisition.
So it seems right now the partners are okay, but did you detect a little bit of edginess? I did. Let's move on now. 3G, it was the low-hanging fruit. All of us waited for it. Finally, India has it. But right after 3G, there's to be 4G. Have we really been successful with 3G? Isn't it too expensive? There are no mass momentum categories or data packages. How are the companies doing? Are they happy? Did the buzz and hype kill them? Let's find out.
India has waited for 3G for years and years. Despite delays for multiple reasons, finally it's here. Yet it's very expensive, very few people are on it, and spectrum is scarce. Why isn't 3G taking off as per the hype and buzz?
Let's move on to now some of the really important questions that have come, especially to do with 3G. You and me met and we were on another panel a while back, and at that time 3G was about to get introduced. Now we're pretty much smack bang in the middle of it all. Just tell us first, before I have questions, experience, did it live up to expectations? Was there overhype? Because you had played it down tremendously versus a lot of hype and buzz. Is it still the same?
Now India on the cusp of broadband is very much where voice was in 1994. It can only go northwards.
Okay.
Right? India needs broadband. India needs broadband access. I'm told about 100 million Indians actually access the internet world, but only about 1% people have access to broadband. So even if you were to go drastically wrong, you can only go northwards on this one. Whether 3G will be the enabling technology or 2.5G will continue or 4G will come in India is a matter of how we progress in future. Nobody can predict that.
Everybody says for very less spectrum, everybody paid too much of money, and that is a reality for India. You also spoke about the fact that you can't really open yourself out and become a mass momentum 3G company, because then the service that we get will be terrible. We're not going to be anywhere near 3G. Right now, I will give you this compliment and say 3G from yours and other companies is actually a great experience right now. But you can't make it super cheap. You can't give unlimited connections. You can't get what you did with voice in India, taking it from 16 rupees to paisas in 3G, and that I think is the unfortunate part in India right now. And will it change?
So two fallacies. One is a fallacy of enough spectrum available, and you're right that there's nobody who's a pan-India operator with own spectrum on 3G. I mean, there are arrangements that people have worked out on roaming with each other. But truly speaking, the entire auction process was designed to make it very dear. And you're right that after you look at that, the business case is not easy to come by. It's a very tough market. And can 3G services, given that business model, sell very cheap in this country? Answer is no. Right? But yeah, tomorrow the industry can decide to say, all right, we'll go below costs and and stuff like that.
If 3G isn't delivering and we're already talking about 4G, will things change? Will companies who have already paid too much pay more for 4G?
I think it's an issue of scale of investment. Clearly, I think the bigger investments are going to happen in 3G. Even in our market projections, most of the volume going forward is on the 3G for the next few years. But what you'll start seeing is LTE, TDD deployments happen actually fairly soon. We think the ecosystem is ready, the trials are being very successful. And it may be a phased out investment, and that's why we believe LTE as a complement to 3G and EVDO actually makes a lot more sense than LTE as a standalone network. Because LTE as a standalone network would require a huge amount of investment, and we don't think that's very economical or sustainable. But combined with 3G and EVDO investments and with multi-mode devices, I think it can be a win-win situation for everyone.
3G story isn't looking very good for India right now, but it could change if the players and the government does some radical things.
So 3G and 4G, a sticky wicket. The government must wake up. The next 100 million people are waiting for mobile broadband. Will we be able to give it to them? Well, the next question that comes up is all to do with the devices we'll use. Each company announcing new kind of devices, from cheap tablets, ultrabooks, smart books, new netbooks, new smartphones. Which will be the next big device? Where are the problems? Well, we've got the CEOs to answer.
New phones, new devices, new tablets, new notebooks. While this is great, it's also leading to clutter at retail and clutter in the minds of the consumer. Qualcomm has spoken about a new notebook called the SmartBook, but nothing came out of it. And then Intel came up with the Ultrabook. Is that any different?
Now, one of the other things that comes up whenever you speak about these and with Microsoft's announcement is you're coming into the territory of Microsoft's other, or people say, between Intel and Microsoft, they're almost sleeping together. But here now is a very startling announcement, one that takes away that almost monopoly that the two of them had. You think then Intel now will try and come into exactly where your domain is? Is that in some way an accurate thing of thinking what Intel might do?
Right. No, Intel clearly wants to come into the smartphone space. Everybody recognizes that really mobile is where the future of computing is going. I mean, you look at India, just as an example, there's 5 times as many data-capable devices in India than there are PCs, and that's just growing, and that's really a trend that's going worldwide. We think in 2010, that was when more mobile broadband was available or used than fixed broadband. I mean, things are changing so rapidly.
Okay, let's come to, like I said, my favorite topic, smart books. Now, last time we saw demos and prototypes, we also saw finished products, yet it hasn't really come into the market and we haven't seen those products come out. Why?
Well, what happened was the iPad really was that kind of a concept. It didn't have a keyboard, and when we said the name Smart Book, obviously people then think of notebook, but we were really thinking of those attributes which we just said.
Those are features, could be any form factor.
It could be any form factor, and we had designed tablet designs and so forth, and a little bit of it got held up because Android came out with Honeycomb and they delayed that a little bit, and so now you're seeing things like the HTC Flyer is a gingerbread device, but a lot of the Honeycomb devices came out, and so that delayed a little bit getting that on Android. But now I think we're going to see the wave come, particularly with the Microsoft announcement.
Okay, great. So one of the things that has happened which surprised us all was the fact that Intel came up with Ultrabooks, called it the Holy Grail, as if they've invented it from almost nowhere, and every single thing in that is pretty much what you spoke about as being a smart book. So where does the Ultrabook fit in? Where does the smart book fit in? Where does it go from here?
Well, what Intel's trying to do is bring their power consumption down so they can have that thin, light form factor without a fan. We'll see. I've seen the hardware designs that are coming on ARM and on Intel. I'm pretty confident that we'll see very much more aggressive designs based off of ARM. Plus the cost points are going to be great because we're coming up from the mobile space where there's a lot more pressure on the price of that chip that goes inside that device, because we have to go after the mass market. You have to have the price low. So again, a lot of capability. There's dual cores, there's quad cores, there's new microprocessor architectures, there's new graphics capabilities. This is what's going to make these ARM-based devices really be competitive against whatever Intel chooses to call those devices.
One of the other very exciting new categories is the low-cost smartphone, and while it's an exciting category, too much competition here is killing margins and innovation.
So let's start with one particular aspect of your company that truly put you on to the roadmap, and which is you were very aggressive and you took out an economy Android smartphone, and you were one of the first to truly deliver what is not a clunky, cheapened down product, but a full-featured product at a great price. And then everybody else got onto the bandwagon. Getting tougher now?
Well, I think definitely, we are in a competitive environment today, and at Spice what we do is we keep pushing ourselves. So when we introduced Android, we were very careful to focus on capacitive versus resistive screens, not compromise on experience that the consumers get. As we are moving forward, of course, there's more competition coming, but we are not holding back. We are also coming out with a new range of devices. We've just launched a 7-inch tablet, which we've brought to the market. We continue to focus on value for money, and therefore keep pushing our partners to see how we can bring more value to the consumer.
One of the companies that lost some traction in the smartphone category despite a great brand and legacy has been Sony Ericsson. Can it come back and make a new name now? And on the other hand, HTC, a relatively small player, has become a huge player and moving very strongly. Both are on Android, and yet there seems to be big differences right now.
Clearly, the consumer connect to me was missing for a little while. I wouldn't say it was absent, but it was a little bit on a low key compared to what it ought to have been. That's something that we're working on. So the W8 is the start of the whole process. It's a part of a journey. If I look at it, in this evolving smartphone thing, there are certain things that we can bring on the table, which is to connect with the consumer on an ongoing basis. That I think is extremely important. So things on the digital plane, that's something that's extremely key for us that we start to work with. The fact that we have other players in the Sony ecosystem, be it music or Sony Music, Sony Television or Sony Pictures, and that we can integrate some offers, and we start doing that in the W8 all over again, is something that again adds value and therefore allows you to kind of be a significant trailblazer compared to what we were doing, which is more vanilla product-driven strategy. The fact that we've now started to appeal and work with operators is again unique, because if you look at the W8, very rarely would you find an offer in a sub 10,000 category which would come back with the money back. You can expect that to happen at a 30,000, 40,000 price band level, but to have it on a sub 10,000 is again
that's a game changer. And nobody would associate that with Sony Ericsson for sure.
No one would associate that with Sony Ericsson for sure.
Combination of the hardware, it's a combination of the form factor, it's a combination of the software, the battery life, the screen experience. It's all of that combined into a smartphone experience, and that's where we truly excel, because the consumer just doesn't want a piece of smartphone just for the applications. There are many things that they desire, and we pay attention to every detail, whether it's a unibody design which is very specific to HTC, whether it's a HTC Sense experience, whether it's the accessibility, whether it's the form factor of the screen. So all of that goes into combining a great smartphone experience.
In the tablet market, innovators are hitting in from new angles. A tablet that is also a navigation system is one such move.
A major launch today, a CarPad. So what you've really done is you've taken your best product, which is a standalone navigation system, and you've taken the best seller, which is tablets and pads, and you've converted the two together. So good job with that. Let's find out a little bit more about where the idea came from. Why a tablet with your software?
Over the last 4 years, when we introduced GPS navigation in cars, we researched a lot and discussed a lot with car travelers what were they looking for. They said they were very happy with the navigation, and they said that in the car we'd love to have more entertainment, connectivity, productivity, and not just as a personal device, but something for everybody in the car, be it in the front seat or the back seat. So with the new technology coming in of 3G and connectivity and the new form factors like tablets, we felt this is a great way that we can merge the needs of car travelers, anybody in the car, be it a male, a female, a child, an adult, and the offerings that we have, which is navigation, and come out with an interesting CarPad, which is a connected navigation and entertainment device for the cars.
There'll be many who will say, I can buy a tablet now for 7,000 or 8,000 from, there's much competition now in the tablet market, and buy a software for $49. That's about 10, 11,000 rupees. Why would I buy this at twice the price?
We've really designed the CarPad from ground up, thinking about what you would need in the car. Of course, consumers can pick and choose and put together apps and devices. What we found is that consumers like the convenience of having a device which, as soon as they open up, tells them what they should be using it for, rather than having to pick and choose various things. And we felt that we could converge it all together in a device that could be useful for them in the car, while they're navigating, searching for friends, and then of course in the home office or in a plane.
There's another big question. What's the next big game changer? Is it going to be the hardware, the mobile phones and tablets you use? Is it the software and the apps, or the services like 3G? Where will the real momentum come from?
Growth in the mobile device market is being fueled from multiple sides. New innovations and features are making devices smaller, thinner and lighter, and yet more powerful. On the other hand, apps and software are fueling sales, growth and demand. Yet none of this would make any sense without services and network operators upgrading to newer levels and moving from 2G to 3G and even 4G, which from the 3 is going to be the main reason for growth.
Here we are, Qualcomm, event India on, and we are seeing hardware, demonstrations of apps, software, services, all of which you also constitute. What's becoming more important now? Because this seems to be a strange game now. Is it hardware that will lead software, software that will lead apps or services? Where's the big one now?
When you look at my 2015 vision, it talks about only two things: being the loved brand and enriching lives of millions. So I think it's now an ecosystem case. It is not about hardware, software, it's about customer experience and providing solutions to customers.
I think for the first time, with what's happening with the smartphones as a whole, is bringing all players in together. We used to talk about it before, but actually we're seeing it in action. So be it the operators, be it the consumers that therefore have their own user-generated content, you suddenly have the ability to kind of bring all of these players together. And that to me itself is one mega trend that I would feel so excited about.
It seems like the momentum will come from all three. Which one will propel us forward? Only time will tell. I'll leave you now with a little bit of crystal ball gazing. Do remember, all these top CEOs, they have R&D labs and they have money being pumped into new innovations that we have no idea about. What's exciting them about the future? Here then are things that we got excited about.
Now, we're really interested in peer-to-peer technologies, because what they'll allow you to do is actually interact with the physical world around you in a way that merges cyberspace. So some of the things we've done is augmented reality that puts cyber objects into the real world. So this idea of the phone being a sensor, a sixth sense to tell you what's around you, and a remote control so you can control objects in the real world around you, I think that's going to be a really exciting.
Cloud is the only answer to bailout, where you only use resources on demand. And I think this is a real service which I think will take the world by surprise.
We will be coming out with devices which will actually be smart-like devices without them being smartphones.